Everyone's staring at Bitcoin's price, but the smartest people in the room, they're watching something else.
We are absolutely obsessed with price, right? I wish that more of us would spend time talking about the other thing that I actually think is worth being obsessed about, which is so what's the electricity that's produced in the wrong time, the wrong place, or maybe something in between that? It's oftentimes clean energy. The mining sector has the greatest skin in the game, right? The narrative that makes sense to me to explain Bitcoin's largely sideways price action for an entire year is that
Kent Halliburton joins me to expose the real signal behind Bitcoin's next move and why the next expansion might already be locked in under the surface.
we're not really paying attention that there's this thing that's just kind of propping up the price underneath. The rubber band is being stretched really tight. At what point does the rubber band get let loose?
Mr. Kent Halliburton, thank you so much for joining us here today and enlightening us, something that is not talked about really enough.
Yeah, honored to be here, Brandon. We've had a good pregame workup to kind of prep some of the ideas and thoughts that you want to cover, and I'm excited for the conversation today. You know, I think the metaphor of Bitcoin is still something everybody's grappling with. Like, what is this thing, right? And I think for me, when I think of it as a digital organism. You know, this is the first digital anything that is backed by energy, right? And so arguably that means that we have something digital that's tied to the laws of physics. And to take that analogy just one layer deeper, for me, I look at Bitcoin as, okay, a digital organism. So what's its DNA? Like, what actually is it made of? And when I look at that, there's actually a dual helix in the DNA of Bitcoin as a digital organism. And one is the price. And we are absolutely obsessed with price, right? Like, what is this thing relative to the value of the dollar, right? That is the myopic obsession. And I wish, like you said, that more of us would spend time talking about the other thing that I actually think is worth being obsessed about, which is the other side of that dual helix of the DNA of Bitcoin, which is the computational power, because that's a dual helix of DNA because it defines the dance of the price is interrelated with the hash rate or the computational power of the network. And in concert, those two things move in parallel up and to the right. And so there is kind of a twist to it, if you will. And that's why I think of it as a digital organism, because the computational power is tied to the laws of physics, which means that Bitcoin itself is grounded in reality. And if you ever have the absolute pleasure to show up at, say, a 100 megawatt mining farm, you will find it a visceral experience as all these mining rigs are humming and burring away. And you can literally feel the vibration of all that electricity being harnessed in the air. I mean, it's a radical experience. And you realize, oh my gosh, this thing that I'm just pushing around on this network of value on the internet is actually something real and tangible. And it's not just magic internet money. There's an actual physical nature to it.
So there's so many things I want to get into here about, obviously, the red and blue divide, how the network functions when price is down and we have capitulation and malaise and people are starting to freak out. But you just touched on something that I think is important. People have seen, especially in the legacy media, right? Local news, you see all these stories of this mining farm is by us and it's hurting me physically and mentally and all these things. That's all you see. You don't see any of the good things, obviously, of cleaning up the environment, which there's a litany of those stories. And but I guess, what do you say to people when they're coming to you with, the mining, the farms are bad, and the noise, and it's hurting all these people? Like, what is the truth behind what's actually happening?
Well, let's go first to the source of that truth, right? Like, we have a lot of objection in this day and age with mainstream media in general, right? And so how many topics do we look at that come from the mainstream media and now say, man, I don't know if I really buy into that story? And with Bitcoin mining, I think we've been working to make that same argument that, man, what's being pumped your direction isn't the full and honest truth here, right? Just like all these other subjects aren't the full and honest truth. Why do you think that they're saying the full and honest truth about mining? So that's where I like to first say is like, hey man, Just look at the messenger before you get
It's a great point.
up in arms about Bitcoin mining. But the truth is best described by looking at the incentives, right? The most important factor in Bitcoin mining as to if you're going to do it successfully or not is the price of your electricity, right? So Bitcoin mining wants the lowest cost electricity that it can find. And what is the lowest cost electricity you can find? Well, it's actually a very simple and logical answer. It's the electricity that nobody really wants. Well, why don't you want electricity? Well, there's two reasons. It's either produced in the wrong place or the wrong time, or maybe a combination of both, right? So what's the electricity that's produced in the wrong time, the wrong place, or maybe something in between that? It's oftentimes clean energy. So your hydro dam is typically not located next to a massive population center. When you need electricity during the middle of the day, maybe there's an overabundance of that electricity being produced by solar, and at night there's not enough, right? So that extra power being produced in the day, how do you consume that? Wind is a variable energy source, not always blowing. See, the thing about the grid that people don't understand, or the fundamental thing that I've found in my career, and I've had a career now that is about 15 years deep in working on the grid, from rooftop solar, spent a decade there, and I'm now 5 years into my mining experience here in the Bitcoin industry. And what I found is that people are confused by the idea of electricity, period, because we're not used to a commodity that's a use it or lose it property, right? When it comes to electricity, if you don't use the electricity, it's not that electricity was saved. You just weren't the one consuming it, because when electricity is produced, it has to be used at that point in time. And that's what the grid operator is doing, is they are managing all the power generation on one side. So whether that's you're splitting an atom, so it's a nuclear facility, or we've got drops of water falling and we're going to turn that via turbines and turn that into electricity, or we've got photons hitting a solar panel someplace, that electricity is getting pumped into the grid and somebody has to consume that in real time, or it has to go to waste. There's just no other way to do it, because electricity is a living force. It's the same impulse that drives the neurons in our bodies to fire and for us to actually have physical motion, to speak, to communicate. It's a force of life. And you don't have a way to not use it when it's produced unless you're going to store it in batteries. And batteries at this point are quite expensive. So this use it or lose it nature of electricity, I think, is a fundamental misconception that people have. So when you say Bitcoin mining is consuming a ton of electricity, sure, it's using electricity. But if that electricity weren't being used, what would happen next? That second order consequence isn't talked about. And so what that means is either power generation has to come offline, or if Bitcoin mining is there and maybe there's more demand somewhere else on the grid. So Texas last year, big winter storm came through and suddenly power generation was knocked offline. And when that happened, wind turbines froze up, solar panels, something happened there. But when that happens, now suddenly the consumption of Bitcoin miners on the grid, the operator says, hey, can you guys shut down? Sure, no problem. Like, we have the easiest manufacturing process in the world to shut down. And when that happens, that electricity is freed up to the grid. Now it goes to all the hospitals and the homeowners that need it to run their heaters. And there weren't any massive losses of life. A few years before that, the same thing happened, and there was literally loss of life because there's nobody that could free up electricity to give back to the grid. So there's all these ways that the dynamics of Bitcoin mining fundamentally help. But one of the reasons why it's misunderstood is because people don't understand that you don't store electricity. It's not like the acorns that you're squirreling away into your tree, right? That can be used all winter long. That's just not how electricity works. And there's actually a need by grid operators, because of all the clean energy on the grid itself, to have this type of a load that they can instantly shut down and free that electricity up. That is a very powerful asset for the grid itself. So yes, there's just been a ton of misconception about Bitcoin mining, and it's not surprising because how often does the mainstream media get things right at this point?
Generational wealth doesn't happen by accident. Bitcoin fixed the money, but it didn't fix the system of protecting and passing it on. Bitcoiners, we have to live in two different worlds, idealism versus pragmatism. That's where Meanwhile comes in. It's the world's first Bitcoin-denominated life insurance company, regulated in Bermuda and built entirely by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. With Meanwhile, long-term holders can grow and protect their Bitcoin wealth through tax-free policy loans, no repayment obligation, no margin call risk, while making inheritance simple and secure and entirely in Bitcoin. It's about sovereignty, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts centuries. Because if Bitcoin is forever, your plan should be too. Learn more and sign up with code 4QPBWC at meanwhile.bm. That's meanwhile.bm, code 4QPBWC, or just sign up in the link in the description below. All right, real talk for a second. We all know health insurance is basically a fiat system of healthcare. The biggest debauchery there is. It's expensive, confusing. Somehow you still end up paying hundreds of dollars for a Band-Aid. We moved to crowd sharing almost 5 years ago. It's the best decision we ever made. Instead of sending your money to the insurance company's black hole, you join a like-minded community that directly funds each other's medical bills. Simple, transparent, way cheaper, and that difference you save, you can invest in Bitcoin. It's an amazing win-win. And look, we're part of the Bitcoin community because we believe in freedom, decentralization. Crowd Health brings that same mindset to healthcare. You choose your doctor, you pay in cash, and the community's got your back when the big bills hit. No networks, no middlemen, no bureaucrats trying to approve your care, just people helping people the way it should be. You make decisions about your health. That's as sovereign as it gets. So if you're ready to take the orange pill for your health, this open enrollment, go to Join Crowd Health to get started for $99 for your first 3 months using code Brandon at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code Brandon. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. If you haven't been living under a rock recently, you've seen that the world is completely changing. Seizures, freezing of assets, bail-ins, bailouts, everything and everyone are coming after your money, your time and energy because the system is collapsing in and of itself. That's why Foundation created the Passport Core. Bitcoin Revolution is 2 words, self-custody. Custodying your assets in your mind. This generates the private key to store your wealth forever. This is the revolution. Foundation is built on sovereignty, freedom, and privacy. Go to foundation.xyz/Brandon for $10 off your Passport Core. This beautiful, sleek foundation wallet is everything you need. The ergonomics, the feel, the weight are absolutely incredible. It also comes with the free Envoy app. You can buy Bitcoin straight into self-custody, label and track your coins, send secure air-gap transactions in seconds, beginner-friendly, but also powerful enough for the pros. Foundation is built for sovereignty, so you can take back control of your money in your digital life. Get started today, again, at foundation.xyz/Brandon for $10 off your Passport Core. I mean, they don't tell you the truth on, wars, what happens. I mean, you could go on and on, right? So, I mean, it's, of course, like this little Bitcoin mining thing, of course, they're not going to, that's not going to be true either if they're willing to lie about those big things. So, it's funny. So many of us have gone through formal school. A lot of us have gone through government run schools and public schools for those of you who aren't sure what I'm talking about. It's wild because in school or like as a kid, you growing up, you learn that energy is everywhere. Like you learn the states of energy. Energy isn't destroyed. And which is fascinating to me is we act, and people have done this with water too, like water, like you're wasting water, like, whatever. It's like water doesn't go away, guys. Like you don't just like lose water. It like goes into your sink and then the drain that's like gone forever and you don't get any more of it. It's a cycle. Like energy is not created nor destroyed. It's just there, evenly present in all times and places. And that's what's so fascinating to me. It's like, you can't even see the writing on the wall right in front of people, and they get duped by these stories. It's wild. You have some of the best monikers in Bitcoin, to be totally honest. I mean, we have SaaS flow versus cash flow, which you've talked about. We talked about better Bitcoin before the show. Wild Sats. I was thinking you always talk about wild Sats, and I was thinking of feral Bitcoin and wild Sats, bug out Sats. You have a lot of these great monikers. I would love for you to just kind of run down, where these kind of come from and really what they mean at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I think you're touching on something near and dear to me, which is I do have kind of a cypherpunk ethos, but through hardware is how I see it. And I do think that Bitcoin mining represents a fundamentally cypherpunk approach to money printing, right? So just to mention something that I don't think also gets talked about enough is that Bitcoin is actually 2 novel inventions. They're both 0 to 1. One is the decentralized ledger that everybody knows and loves and talks about. It allows me to send value from where I am here in Peru to where you are in the US, and nobody can get in the middle of that. We can transfer value between us, right? The other one, though, is not talked about just as much, but I find absolutely just as radical, which is as long as you have the right hardware, you plug that into electricity and an internet connection, you can generate Bitcoin for yourself. That is by definition a decentralized money printer. there's been nothing like this in the history of humanity, that anybody anywhere on the planet with low enough cost electricity can generate their own Bitcoin. That's radical, right? And when you look at that, where does that Bitcoin come from? It comes from a protocol. So just like you type in HTTPS into your browser, that is a protocol as well. It took me even being in Bitcoin for a while to really like, oh my gosh, like this set of code is the one that's actually sending Bitcoin to my wallet that I can then send to Brandon in an uncensorable way. Like, that's crazy when you really actually break that down. And that code is what's providing the Bitcoin directly to my address. Now, having the ability to do that now means that those Bitcoin that were generated, they weren't bought on a secondary exchange market, right? So as a miner, I produced those Bitcoin. And by definition, those Bitcoin are outside of the banking surveillance state. And that is a fascinating aspect of Bitcoin mining, because that means that anybody that gets involved with this decentralized money printer is able to access capital outside of the banking system. And that's why I call them wild sats, because there's no tracking that has occurred there. Your sats haven't been bagged and tagged. So sats being a fraction of a Bitcoin, right? And they can be your bug out sats because nobody knows that you have them. So kind of the ultimate in privacy. And we have a lot of our customers that are mining specifically to have the bug out sats, because everybody's got kind of on they're a little bit wobbly right now. Are we getting digital IDs? Are we going to get trapped in this open air prison? I don't know. But if I've got bug out sats, I know that I can just hop on a plane, and I've got memorized my seed words. They haven't ever touched the banking system, and I have them there for wherever I land.
Yeah, it's so well said, and that definitely tugged at my heartstrings of growing up in Michigan, hunting, survival. My father just leading me down that road my entire life, so that's why we're here. So, what I want to transition just for a second to just the whole debate of price versus hash rate versus price. It's weird because like when you had a lot of like the stock investors or real estate or whatever it is, and they talk about the fundamentals a lot, and the fundamentals of Bitcoin have never been greater, and really since maybe the 2021 the China mining ban, since then, and you can touch on that and maybe give your quick experience on that and talk about that. But then these last 4 or 5 years have been just record hash rate after record hash rate. So it's just fascinating to me, like why. And again, price has gone up since then. It's up 5x from the lows of where they were 4 years ago, the China mining ban, and then 2022. So it's gone up, but I think there's a lot of people that expected, like, why aren't we at 200,000? Why aren't we at 300, 500? Why isn't it more? It's a scarce asset. So we have record hash rate, record holders of the asset. So why the silence? Like what's happening on the back end that you see maybe that others might not?
Well, I think so the mining sector has the greatest skin in the game, right? Because you actually have to deploy physical hardware, electricity infrastructure. All these things have to come together in advance of being able to receive the Bitcoin, right? And that's different than I've got the capital, I send it to an exchange, I buy the Bitcoin. So there's a fundamentally different dynamic. There has to be risk inserted. And so the fact that this industry continues to bet on the value of mining means that they are expecting the price to increase faster than the hash rate. And that hasn't happened this last year, to be completely transparent. It's been an odd year. I think most of us in the industry have come to it with the mindset of, oh, it's the 4-year cycle. This year should be the big year. And here we are, getting towards the last half of the fourth quarter. No big price run. What is going on? Myself, a couple months ago, I started to shift, and now I'm in the camp of, no, the 4-year cycle is not happening any longer. And maybe it still does, there's still an off chance, but I'm shifted most of my base case over to thinking that it's an extended cycle at this point, because I don't see the fundamentals have changed. What I do see, though, the narrative that makes sense to me to explain Bitcoin's largely sideways price action for an entire year is the IPO idea that was released last week or so. I forget the fella's name. I think
Jordy Visser. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
he deserves to have a shout out because
Yeah.
it's a powerful narrative. It's
It
the
is.
idea that basically anybody that purchased Bitcoin in the early days had a psychological threshold of around 100,000, and at that point, their lifestyles can be dramatically changed. And that's very similar to an early stage employee helping a business get to a successful IPO and then cashing out that equity to transform their lives. He
Mm-hmm.
believes, and it's actually validated based on Unchained behavior, that there's a lot of early stage adopters of Bitcoin that have been selling their Bitcoin around the $100,000 price, and that's largely why Bitcoin has not moved. So that narrative makes sense to me to explain what's going on. And just from a price action standpoint, what I see is this just looks like an incredible base. Now, I don't
Yeah.
know for
Truly.
certain if we are going to take off. Maybe it really is rolling over here. I think we need another couple months before we really know if we've entered a bear market or if the bull is just about ready to blast off. But I tend to think that as much fear is in the market, as slow and as extended as this cycle seems to be, that this is kind of the 20% pullback that has been typical of a lot of bull markets. And we're going to see another leg up here before the end of the year. And I probably sound extremely contrarian right now because most of the market has been saying, oh, woe is me, we're all going to run and die. But let's see.
I mean, it's like typical Bitcoin, right? I mean, I think a lot of us are here in the general sense over the last 15, 16 years because we're probably contrarian. A lot of us are contrarian thinkers, probably visionary type mindsets, entrepreneurial, the INTJ, right? Like there's a lot of that play of that type of personality. So it's always doing what you don't think it's going to do, and which so Bitcoin acts like maybe the people in that are holding it. So it makes kind of sense. But like underneath the surface, what do you see? Like even I guess just even at your company at SAS Mining, when you're talking to other miners, investors, people that are coming in, like what's the sentiment? I guess behind the scenes when price is lagging or it's going sideways or it's not doing what you think it's going to do. Like how is the morale there? Like is there worry on the ground? I guess illuminate the average person just kind of watching and trying to get some alpha.
Oh yeah. So let me address that in a couple of different ways. So first of all, Bitcoin mining it sort of sidesteps all of the price volatility, right? Like the price of a mining rig with SAS Mining and the price of the electricity hasn't changed. The number of sats that are generated on a monthly basis through mining pretty much hasn't changed from 125,000 down to 100,000, right? So the value proposition just fundamentally hasn't changed. But what has changed is market sentiment, right? And that market sentiment, it tends to be, I think Bitcoin's price action is a lot like the moon in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And when it's right, it's like pulling the tide of the entire planet. I talk to a lot of different mining companies and just Bitcoin companies. I wouldn't even be surprised, Brandon, if I ask you if you see views change based on Bitcoin's price action. You probably see that as
drastically.
Well. I mean, it's just like when Bitcoin's price is rising, interest goes up, the world is illuminated, the tides are high, and then Bitcoin's price goes down and interest abates, right? So there is an absolute obsession with Bitcoin's price relative to the dollar. And I've just learned to embrace that as an entrepreneur, and I genuinely lean into sales-based activities when the price is going up, and I lean into operational-based activities when the price is pulling back, because that's the best use of my time.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too, because again, you get a lot of people, again, the last few months, YouTube content or podcasts probably are one of the great signals and signifiers. I'm sure in the mining space, you see it too, to a degree of sentiment of the market, and views start dropping. And that's your early warning sign of, people aren't happy. Because again, like it or not, I've talked about this over time. Again, humans are driven by fear and greed. You and I talked about this offline a little bit. It doesn't matter what any of us say. We can sit here and educate on mining and how great the Bitcoin network is. And there's 21 million, but like the average person, 99.9% of people do not care. They don't care. Till we're blue in the face. We will die trying to explain these things to the average person. So, price is the glorious marketing arm, fear and greed of Bitcoin, like it or not, until it sucks in everything and eats everything, and just, the iceberg flips and we're hyper Bitcoinization. So that's, you have to play in this world if you want to if you want to get the message out there. Otherwise, you're just kind of in the muddled masses and it gets lost. So you said before that, again, like I would love for you to just dive into the immune system of Bitcoin, and being that mining is the immune system. Could you kind of explain that in simple terms, and also, why does it matter for someone who never even plugs in a single ASIC or something like that? Like, could you kind of explain some the importance of it, and also why it is looked at as the immune system?
Yeah. That's I love talking about that aspect of mining because it very much aligns with philosophically why you and I are both here. I know we talked a little bit offline about that. So I want to give a little bit of history for context because there's a bit of history that I don't think gets talked about enough with Bitcoin. So if you look, the Bitcoin network was launched in January of 2009. So we are 16 years later and almost up to its 17th year of operation now. Now, when it was launched, the way that Bitcoin worked is if you downloaded the code to run Bitcoin on your computer, you had a very simple toggle there to actually mine Bitcoin yourself. And so from 2009, when the network was launched, until 2013, everyone that ran Bitcoin software mined their Bitcoin. So if you ever meet somebody that adopted Bitcoin pre-2013, you'll find they have an odd love for mining because they were miners. Almost all of them were. Satoshi, that's how he got his Bitcoin. Like there's a million Bitcoin that we know are dedicated to Satoshi and his wallets, and they all came from his own personal mining. So why did we stop? And that answer is pretty interesting because two things happened simultaneously in 2013. One, the ASIC came online, and that means you needed specialty hardware to be competitive at finding blocks and receiving Bitcoin for mining. Two was Coinbase opened its doors, and that was the first easy to use user interface for acquiring Bitcoin by purchasing it. So both of those things acted as repellents for people to continue mining, and the timeline split for the Bitcoin community, and most of the community has gone to acquiring their Bitcoin by purchasing it. What's fascinating is there are conference series that are available both to the Bitcoin community and to the mining community, and those two communities have very, very little overlap. You go to a mining conference, you won't find too many folks like ourselves that are a Bitcoin miner. Just as if you go to a Bitcoin conference, you rarely will run into miners there, right? It's a very unique aspect that these are kind of both necessary components of Bitcoin, but they're not really as interrelated as you would think. To get to your point, though, about the immune system, what Bitcoin mining does is it creates a competition for creating the next block. So what I mean is there are people like, let's say you and I want to send you a transaction, Brandon. When I send that transaction, it gets relayed and propagated through all the Bitcoin nodes in the system, and it sits in the mempool is what it's called until miners choose to pick it up. And they choose to pick it up because of transaction fees. Like I've agreed that I'm going to pay a certain amount of transaction fees to get that Bitcoin sent to you, Brandon. So the mining community will see that transaction and they will throw it into a block. And when they throw it into a block, they're going to start to mine that block. And mining just means they're going to brute force guess a number. They have to brute force guess this number so that the outcome is a specific, unique response. Now, it's a trivial thing to check if their response was true, but it takes electricity to do that brute force guessing. And that brute force guessing happens trillions of times per second with every single individual mining rig. So what you have is the greatest competition on the planet right now is Bitcoin mining, which is basically a massive lottery where everybody's trying to guess. They put a bunch of transactions to fill a block inside that block, and then they're crunching a number guessing equation over and over and over again, kind of like rolling dice, if you will, and hoping for a specific outcome. That's how it works. It's called a hashing function. Now, I don't want to get more technical than that, but it's just random brute force guessing that consumes electricity to do that guessing. And so as a result of consuming that electricity, if you wanted to actually attack the Bitcoin network, you would have to have enough power to outcompete everybody else. And that's where the immune system comes in for Bitcoin mining, because that operates as a repellent. You need real world resources, both in terms of computational power and electricity, necessary to attack the Bitcoin network. So it's a repellent for any would be attacker. To give you an idea of the scope of that today, it would take more electricity at this point than many countries on the planet are harnessing in order to have what's called a 51% attack. So that just means that you have enough power and computational devices that you could actually be the first to generate blocks ahead of the majority of the network.
One of the fascinating things, and I would love your thought on this, is in the first time, it was maybe a couple of years ago. I think it was maybe Jack Mallers, or I think it was him that was kind of talking about or giving some speeches on it. It was just the realization that Satoshi had done, one of two things. You just kind of touched on them, so I'd love just your thoughts on them. Of he made it so it was random, like you said. It was throwing dice down, and it wasn't the amount of computing power he threw out there. It wasn't I've got more wattage, I've got more that way the biggest guy wins and he just gets to collect it. It truly was random, where the small guy still could always win, and you didn't just win the next block because you had a stronger machine, a type of structure to it. And then also Satoshi connected the physical world to the digital world, physical energy with the digital world for the first time, and through the time chain. So those two revelations for me, just I was already very orange pilled at that point. That was, when it was a couple of years ago, he had said those things, and I was just like, wow, never thought of him that way. So anyway, I would love your thoughts on just extrapolating that a little bit, because you kind of touched on that briefly.
Yeah, it's an analog equivalent may be the difference between the blood-brain barrier, right? Like the pharmaceutical industry is always trying to figure out how to get specific chemicals directly into the brain, right, to help change the cognitive function, and that's being able to do so is an extremely lucrative pursuit. I understand. It's kind of something similar with Bitcoin mining, where nobody has figured out how to bring real world physicality onto the internet, and Satoshi did, because he was able to harness electricity through the proof of work mechanism in such a way that there was a digital token on the other side that was secured by it. And what that does in essence is it creates consequence on the internet. Now you have something where if you attach it to an interaction, that interaction has consequence, because there's real world loss if you fail to uphold your end of that. So give a concrete example, right? Spammers are being out of control, right? AI is making it much worse. Like I will be shocked if we go much more than another year or so before people start to restrict being able to receive messages to their inbox. And the only viable form of currency that would work to stop that is Bitcoin, because it's digitally native. So you may put up a paywall on even your email inbox that says, cool, you want to insert a letter into my inbox, you need to pay a trivial amount of sats. And because those sats represent an actual consequence to the AI agents that may be just spamming everybody's email box online. Like, oh, maybe I should think twice because I only have a certain amount of sats. And those sats are restricted by how much energy was produced to go into creating that Bitcoin, right? That cost of that electricity to begin with. So that's kind of how I think about it, is the consequence has been inserted into the online community. It's not very well distributed yet, but that consequence is there. And I think as the world of AI continues to proliferate spamming and scamming across the web, that people will increasingly embrace, the restriction. And the only one that I see available is a SAT-based paywall for individuals.
Now that you have your hardware wallet, the key data generated needs to be stored in something forever that can withstand fire, flood, nuclear fallout, checks, hockey pucks. This is your 12-word C plate, your 24-word C plate. After a lot of people asking for your 12-word C plate, here it is, stampsy.com, code Brandon for 15% off. After everything that's going on in the world, fires we've seen in the Pacific Palisades, what we've seen happen in Hawaii, everything gone. Titanium seed plates withstands everything. Your posterity will thank you. It only takes a few minutes. Don't let these little things, these small investments scare you from the most important aspects of Bitcoin and the first money we have ever conceived here on earth. Stampseed.com, code Brandon for 15% off. Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter. If you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party, this is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. Yeah, really quick. There's a couple things I want to kind of spider off of that, but you made me think of, I was speaking at the Canadian Bitcoin conference a couple of weeks ago and Camp Nakamoto, the mass adoption event. And I forget which event it was, but I was talking to one of the gentlemen there, and we were talking about how you can tell almost more about what's not being said a lot of times, right? Like the powers that be, they hide things in plain sight, but you can also tell I'm trying to think, the signal is a lot of times what's unspoken in a way. So we've been talking about energy usage, and we've been kind of circling this a little bit with mining, but the hilarity and the irony in all of it is for years it was FUDed, which you might have, and then maybe this is the question that I just thought of, is where this FUD was coming from. Was it from the United States government, the Chinese government, the Russian government? Some governments are flooding Bitcoin to energy usage for so long, because now all of a sudden the FUD has pretty much been completely taken off the table almost overnight with AI. And now it's like AI, they got to use energy. And so it's like this race to build all these things with all the energy usage. So now it's like, you notice nothing is really said anymore over the last year or so about Bitcoin mining energy usage, because it was like, oh, wait. And so now you kind of see the signal there of like, wait, someone was putting that out into the world. Like we started with like legacy media and just like the lies that are told. Do you have any like insight or background into who or what entities might have been throwing that out there? Because now it's vanished. Now you can't find, there's no, like it's okay now because AI is here and they've completely stripped that off.
Yeah, man. I think that there was some nefarious force that was pushing to malign the industry. Probably. Do I really want to go peeking behind that curtain to find out who? No, I don't, because the consequences of knowing might not be something that is healthy for me. But I do think, just more broadly, you see this in any sort of industry or business anywhere. If there is an incumbent force and there is a disruptive force, the incumbent force will try to fight and attack this disruptive force. Mm-hmm. I think it's just a law of nature. And it is 100% true that Bitcoin is a disruptive force to the incumbent financial system. So that they are going to try to malign, fight, and keep people away from it seems like a natural outcome and just part of the show. And so I don't try to get too wrapped up in it. One of my favorite quotes to live by is by Buckminster Fuller, which is, hey, you don't fight the existing system. You just build a better system and people will naturally gravitate to it. And that's what I truly believe we're doing in the Bitcoin community. It's why we continue to lean on other Bitcoin companies and we market to Bitcoiners is, cool, you guys have a fiat-based reality that's untethered from physical reality. You guys keep living in a delusional state. The Bitcoin community is just getting retethered to reality. Physics, traditional values are coming out of that. It just feels like a I'm going to make up a word here that sounds ridiculous, but it feels like we're healthening the
Mm.
the
Yep.
community, right? Like I
Yep.
oftentimes think about how this framing of something's good or bad is such a stupid framing. I wish we just framed things more on what promotes life force and what detracts from life force, because I find as a species we're much better off when we're focused on promoting health and life, and things that take away from that are things we should just avoid. So yeah, anyway, I know I'm waxing a bit philosophical there, but I just find that Bitcoiners seem to be the only healthy part of society at large. And I kind of think that we've become, whether we intended to or not, the radical middle, while the left and the right are
Hmm.
getting more and more extreme with one another. And we're just sort of pulling what they talked about in the 60s of just dropping out. I think that's what we're doing. We're just stacking out of the fiat system.
So true. Ken, have you given much thought to? You just made me think of something else I wanted to sneak in here. Have you given much thought? Because I've often thought about the to this exact point of you look around the Bitcoin community, and when you go to any Bitcoin conference, whether it's just Bitcoin signal, there's not other fiat, crypto garbage mixed in or whatever. And it's just like that true signal. And you look around at the people, and there's thriving families, big families, health, all these different things. And you just sit there and you sit back and you're like, wow, these are going to be some of the wealthiest people in the world in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And they're going to be the ones running things. Now, I know a lot of Bitcoiners, maybe 95, 98, 99% won't run for things or run businesses or whatever. They'll live in a citadel or a new city they establish or whatever. But there's going to be a couple percent of the population in Bitcoin that are going to have a lot of wealth, and they are going to be accumulating the assets. They are going to be reshaping the world in the vision that a lot of us talk about. It's that I've thought about that a lot. Is that something you kind of, because we just kind of touched on that. Is that something you've kind of thought about, just kind of extrapolating out?
Yeah, I heard a statistic last cycle that stuck with me, and I have not gone and validated it again, but it resonated. Sometimes you hear something, it's just like, "Oh, that feels true," right? So take it with a grain of salt when I state this, but I read that when Bitcoin's price got over 200,000, the majority of billionaires on the planet will be Bitcoin wealthy.
Mm,
Billionaires. And that may no longer be true with the distribution we've experienced this year, but there will be
true.
a price point at which that will be true.
Hmm.
And I think, uh, unfortunately, the Bitcoin community in a lot of ways is, you've probably seen that meme online where the man you want to avoid the most is the one that just wants to be left alone. I kind of feel
Hmm.
like that's the Bitcoin community, right?
Yeah.
Like we just have, hey, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. I want to check out. I want to make my citadel. I want to have my family.
Yep.
And I think, unfortunately, that it's our community that sees the glaring hole. And when there's the absence of leadership is when a true leader usually steps up in a begrudging way. And unfortunately, I think that's our community. So whether we want to or not, the yoke is sort of on our backs to rebuild the institutions. And I won't be surprised if an orange party shows up at some point to represent this. And I know that we seem like we're a bunch of occultish figures. The fact that we believe hard money is important to have healthy families and healthy lives. And I always like to remind people that the root word of culture is cult, right?
Yep.
So any culture is going to seem a bit cultish. And if you have come from a fiat based reality, it will be very hard to understand what a hard money reality is. And I'm still learning. I've been on this journey for 10 years, and I recognize the truth and the signal of having hard money only after, kind of going through the crypto house of mirrors and getting lost for a couple of years, but coming back to the thing of absolute scarcity secured by energy and encryption. Ultimately removes what I think has been the Achilles heel of our species. You look for thousands of years, anytime that there was a centralized form of money printing, it has always been abused to the detriment of that society. And it is like the ring of Sauron to me, where the power is
Yeah.
just too great. Our species cannot manage it. And having Bitcoin, I think, is the first time in human history that we have this encrypted technology that's beyond our grasp to destroy. And we can finally put away that stupid game of trying to control the money printer. And then what does that unlock for humanity? what can we then go do with all that time and energy? I would argue right now that there is so much of the creative human potential that is dedicating itself to being as close to the money printer as possible. And if those people no longer have that even as an option structurally because we're on a Bitcoin standard, what do we unlock as a species? Do we suddenly find ourselves rocketing across the galaxy? I don't know, but that's a reality that I very much like to help empower for my kids and grandkids, if I'm lucky enough to have them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ken. I mean, it's really amazing, truly. I look at the time period, really since 1971, of really a modern dark ages. And it's that's obviously polarizing to say because it's like, wow, look at how great we have it and stuff like that. But it's like, look at WTF happened in 1971, the website, right? Like just everything, the children born out of wedlock, the divorces, everything's exploded. And it's really a depression, broken families, people that are in debt, just the mass amount of chaos that has come. And we've kind of lived through the depression. People are like looking for like a 1929 style depression, and it rhymes, it's not the same. It's just, it's a depression, but in a different way. And I think a lot of us we've been living through it. And to your point, I think a lot of these games, you think of the lost man hours, people trying to re-adjudicate, how many genders there are or something like that. And it's like, you think of the lost man hours that humans, men and women, have had to spend re-adjudicating something like that. And we're like, we have the cure for your economic cancer over here. And we're over here dealing with things we've known for thousands of years and having to like go back and like reopen these things that are, this case is closed, guys. We're like, it's so wild to me. And the nation states are going to have to come to Bitcoiners to get their Bitcoin, like all these different things and the wealth that will transfer. It really is amazing. In saying all this, like how has Bitcoin changed you? I know some of your story a little bit, and I'd love for you to touch on it just briefly of, being in the solar world and stuff like that and Silicon Valley and having experience there and then coming to what you're doing now at SAS, obviously, in starting this. So how has Bitcoin changed, Kent?
That is a profound question. Give me a moment. I'm going to address something. I'm going to address something though that you said that I actually think is. I like that framing of calling it a modern dark ages, and I think it is. And this is going to sound odd, but I think that our society has really gotten off the rails, and I do think it's because we don't have hard money. It's sort of making us lazy and crazy, to quote my Turkish guide when I toured Esopus in 2015. He said, "Oh yeah, why did this all fall apart? Why did the Romans, lose Esopus? Oh, it's quite easy. They got too rich and they got lazy and crazy." And that's always stuck with me. Is that when people have too much money, they get lazy and crazy. And I can't say that he's wrong, but what I do think is that when you look at our reality sort of post 1971, it's gotten more material and more secular and less about purpose, meaning, and the importance of life. And I think that fundamental shift is misaligned with the higher aspect of ourselves. So, I think most people will sit around and tell you, I am more than my five senses. And I just like to think that part of ourselves that's beyond our five senses is what I would call like our higher aspect, our spirituality, or spirit, whatever you want to say, right? But I think that we've just completely separated from that part of ourselves by going down this material secular reality. And I think that we've lost a lot of what it means to be human. And I think in doing so, it's that schism has caused a lot of problems. And so I like to see that the Bitcoin community is coming back to that. And I think that actually brings us back to timeless human values and traditions. And I'm not saying that I'm not like a hardcore conservative or traditionalist or anything like that. But I just think if you look at the thousands of years of human history, that there's certain values and traditions that serve to permeate all cultures and traditions. And that's the things that make us really human. And that's the things that give our lives meaning. And that's the things that give our time a sense of purpose and enjoyment. And it's sort of sad that we've gone away from it. So I'm maybe a humanist, if you want to put a word on it, but I think that we are at our best when we are living in those traditional values, and we're sort of in our biology at that point. And I think, there's a few things, and this is stuff I've learned on my journey. So adopting Bitcoin has given me solid ground to stand on. I didn't realize it, but chasing zeros in the bank account, which I did do in the rooftop top solar sector, chasing those zeros in the bank account was a very hollow experience, and never felt like there was enough of. There's no satiation to that experience, versus I feel from my study and conviction of Bitcoin, like I've got conviction and a solid base to stand on instead of a rotating hamster wheel that I'm trying to keep up with. And as a result of having that solid base to stand on, I'm able to save for the important life events, whether that's, my kids' education in the future, the family vacation that gives those bonding moments between myself and my wife and kids, whether that's for, my kids to have housing in the future. Like if you go from society to society, there are core things that savings does for people, and most of those savings unlock specific biological based experiences that give our lives meaning. So having savings that is being eroded and destroyed by theft, I mean, I get angry at it, because inflation is an insidious, secretive form of theft. It's like a thief in the night that's coming and stealing the oxygen out of your room and your life force, because in order to now have the same earning potential, you now need to work more hours to keep up with the inflation theft that's occurred. And I know that cannot occur with Bitcoin. So it makes me sleep easier and have a more grounded sense of my reality. And I know that's very esoteric stuff that I'm talking about. It's very heady stuff, and it's out there, but our core is what matters. And I think so many of us have been following our heads and not our hearts and lives, that that's not how we're designed. Just biologically and evolutionarily, your heart was evolved way sooner than your head. Your heart has a lot of nerve endings in it. And if you use your head to follow your heart, you are going to live not necessarily a easier life, but you are going to live a more meaningful and purposeful life that when you're on your deathbed, you will be able to reflect on it with gratitude and grace. And that's the life I want to live. I don't want to be chasing the next Lambo or the next gold chain and then get to my deathbed and say, boy, man, I wish I would have worked harder. That just seems utterly stupid to me.
It's incredible. That's so beautifully said, Ken. I mean, that's, I couldn't agree more. I feel like that's, I don't know how we go on with the pod from here, because that's it's so well said. I love that you said the five senses. We were made to be more than that, because this is something that really tugs at my heartstrings as well. And just, I always talk about the 6 higher faculties that you have that God gave you outside of being an animal. Like every animal has those 5 senses, but you have memory, will, perception, reason, imagination, and intuition. Use those things. That's what's frustrating at times, where, and again, we're all human, where we all are somewhere on that spectrum of using those higher senses at times. But how do we, the answer seems so obvious, and kind of dovetailing back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Like the answer seems so obvious, and they're right there. Like you said, inflation is theft, and like all these things. And it's like you're screaming from your rooftop, like, hey, here's Bitcoin, this whole network, there's the mining, run a node and hold Bitcoin in a cold storage wallet, like all these things. Like really at the end of the day, like very simple now. 10 years ago, I get it. Like wasn't super simple, not nearly as simple as it is now. And it's so simple nowadays from what you guys are doing at SAS mining, the cold storage walls people have now. I mean, they've got touch screen. I mean, it's insane how easy this process really is. And like, what orange pills people to see that cure for economic cancer? Is it just more fear and greed, a number going up? Is it bad events happening? Is it people getting their bank accounts frozen? Like, what is it to you? Is it just time, the demographic shift of people and the older generation just like, okay, and then the money passing down to the younger generation and they get it? Like, how do you see this playing out in the coming years?
Oh, I hate to say it, but I do think the period of the curious adopting Bitcoin is over. I think that's the INTP, INTJ, Myers-Briggs personality.
Yeah.
So you referenced this earlier, but for your audience's sake, there is an uncanny distribution of personality types that have adopted Bitcoin, the majority of which do fall into this camp. But sounds like, Brandon, you probably do. I know I do. But it's a certain personality type that is curious, there's an itch. They keep scratching it, and oh my gosh, like I've got to change my reality, right? And then there's, I think, the common majority of people, and this is not because we're exceptional people. It's just we're insatiably curious and truth oriented and willing to be truth oriented to the point of disagreeableness to walk away from their tribe. Like that really is the defining characteristics of the INTP and INTJ is disagreeableness, right? So we don't come off as necessarily the most social, agreeable people and necessarily life of the party, although there is quite a bit of that. But I think that the rest of folks, I've come to the conclusion that it's pain. Pain is going to be the motivating factor.
Same.
There just has to be enough pain that they will come for looking for a solution, and that's where we have to be. I think the worst thing that we can do as a community is to hop up and down and tell people "I told you so." We need to sort of welcome people in when they're ready and just keep mentioning Bitcoin, dropping into conversation. I don't think you can orange pill anybody by brute force. I think it's sort of stupid. I built a career on sales, and if I haven't learned one lesson over and over again in my sales career, it's that you have to meet people where they're at. You don't get to come where you're at and dominate that other person and convince them in a non-consensual way to be where you're at. Like it just doesn't work. You're just going to lead to a lifetime of resentment towards you for doing that. I know I have family members that still don't. Orange pilling my wife, which didn't happen until this year, and I've been on a 10-year journey, was probably my biggest victory in the orange pill.
That's amazing. Congrats.
It's just is like it takes an unbelievable amount of time, like purging fiat from your system. It doesn't sound like it, but I have come to think of fiat as a form of modern day sorcery. And I do think that the central banks are the biggest source of evil on the planet because they are responsible for the theft of time for billions of people across the planet. And they have cast this spell of we use this little piece of paper on everybody and they're going to run around and work for it and we can steal part of it. And we've convinced everybody, even though there's no tie to reality with this piece of paper, that it's money. Like, I mean, wow, what a form of modern day wizardry. It's actually, if you can just step back and see it, it's just like it's some sort of marvelous invention in a horrible way. But I do see it as just this like the common masses are under this like dark magic spell, and it's crazy when you can see it. And you seem like the crazy one for noticing it. But I mean, I'm going to call a spade a spade. I am disagreeable.
Yeah, that is and it's funny. I always think of, I always come back to good and evil spirits. I mean, at the end of the day, I do truly think that there's, something way above all of us. And you kind of have like, the proverbial red pill, blue pill, or it's like, hey, which way do you choose? Modern man, free man. And if you choose, hey, I'm going to build my own towers of Babel. Like, I think I know best. Hey, I think I can manipulate markets. Hey, I think I can do all these things. And you've now chosen all the downstream consequences of this, which you just outlined. And I think that that's the broken money versus honest money. And you can't have good fruit from a bad tree, right? I mean, these are principles, timeless principles from biblically speaking or whatever, for thousands of years we've known. And if you choose like, hey, I'm going to eat the fruit from the tree, I'm going to be God. I know more, like I'm the center of the universe. Basically, you're removing the truth and putting yourself there in the middle. Then you now have to deal with all the ramifications of that instead of just humbling yourself to, hey, this is the honest thing. I'm not going to mess with it. Let's protect it. And now everything good can emanate from that. So I couldn't agree more. And it seems radically easy and radically obvious for those who can see. And it seems radically, like you said, radically insane to someone who's stuck in that river, like swimming up that river of garbage that you're trying to like wade through. It's truly astounding. So I want to come back really quick to what we were talking about earlier, to the price leading hash leading price, all that we were talking about earlier. So in your eyes, smart money, like what's going on? I would deem smart money, people getting into mining and putting a lot of time, energy, buying miners, like all this stuff. Again, that the hash rate keeps going up. Again, what say you? And I know Max Kaiser has been beating this, relentlessly for years, that hash rate leads price. And a lot of people say no, price leads hash. So again, like the fundamentals have never been stronger. So I do want to kind of like just reiterate that and just kind of have you tap into this a little bit more and unpack it a little bit more, but behind the scenes of, why would, prices, seem, again, up double from last year in essence, a year ago, but why does it seem to be languishing, or why is it, having these dips when we know that the fundamentals have never been stronger, and people continue to pour into the energy part of the sector?
Yeah, so I used to believe a bit more strongly that hash led price, and this last
Mm-hmm.
cycle, just how muted it's been this last year, has got me questioning that. I will
Mm-hmm.
agree, and that is probably by design. I think that the game changed when the ETFs launched, and we moved to. So you look at it. I think as a community we can be rather naive, because if you look at Wall Street has entered the chat room, guys, right?
Yeah.
We are talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So the nation state has entered the chat room. If we don't think that Wall Street is going to play games with us, and if we don't think that the nation states are going to play games with us, I think we are horribly naive. And I think
Yeah.
that that's why it is a new. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto.
Yeah.
We're just not. And I don't know what that means. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate this as well. And I would say what's caught my attention, to kind of to speak about what's missing more than what's there, is not so much the sideways action, so much as the constant patient bid that's been underneath the price, where many times
Yes.
this year it looks like price was just going to fall down a cliff and keel over. I think we're literally experiencing another one of those times right now. But there's been this patient bid that's just been buying the bottom. Like, hey, we're not going to aggressively go out and seek to get our position filled. But when we think it's fair value here, we're going to buy up the bottom. And I think we're at another one of those moments right now. I could be wrong. And that patient bid is, I think, the silent indicator of the institutional adoption of Bitcoin. It's kind of like that shark that's just deep under the water and coming up and munching the seal when the seal isn't paying attention. And I think that's kind of us here, is we're not really paying attention that there's this thing that's just kind of propping up the price underneath. So I think there's going to come a certain moment, and we call it hyper Bitcoinization, I think. And I think of it as an inflection point, and I don't know exactly when or how it will occur, but there's going to come a point in time, I do believe, where there will be a crack in the tectonic plates of the debt-based financial system, and something is going to happen to where people are going to be rushing the exits, and Bitcoin is the door, and price rockets. And this sort of suppressed price action that we've experienced this last year has me scratching my head thinking, do we get a really radical increase next year? And then when I layer that on with the Max Kaiser, price follows hash rate, and you go look at the hash rate chart, because very few Bitcoiners do this, right? They'll obsess over what's the price doing all day long, but they're not obsessing about how much capital is flowing in to acquire hash rate, which is a computational power, and how that's moving just completely up and to the right at such a fast clip. But that is a dedicated skin in the game approach to acquiring Bitcoin based on the belief that Bitcoin's value is going to go up. So it just feels like the rubber band is being stretched really tight. Hash rate's clear up here and price is clear down here. At what point does the rubber band get let loose? I don't know, but it feels like it's going to happen, and that'll be the actual top of this next cycle is when that happens. And so that's where I'm at. I think that's most likely to happen sometime next year, at least Q2, maybe as late as Q4 right now. And I don't want to put any prices on that, because I think we all may be surprised to the upside. I think that we've been sort of deluded, because when the game from the institutions and the states has been to help keep the price level and flat, believe me, if they want to go the other direction, it's just going to go just as hard, as how I see it. So I don't think that the middle will be a place that we stand for very long.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that the 4-year cycles, just everything, it's going to get elongated, and it comes to its own end to a degree, right? I don't know how people want to look at that necessarily, but it just gets elongated, or it breaks, or whatever. I think that because it's now becoming a bigger and bigger asset class, it's going to start doing a lot of its own things. In saying that, what do you think the end game is for Bitcoin, in the sense of, What, are you hey, it has to account for every dollar in the world, so it's got to get to 900 trillion, or one, I guess it's probably 1 quadrillion now, right around there, in the total assets in the world. It's like, it is money, so it has to account for every dollar in the world, or it's one half of every trade, so it's 450 to 500 trillion. Like, what do you see Bitcoin, whether it's 10 years from now or 100 years from now, like how do you see it eventually kind of playing out and to its final resting spot?
Oh boy, man, you're asking a question I've not pondered very much, so I don't know that I've got a very good answer to it. I sort of am like a level by level sort of
Okay.
mindset. But here's what
Mm-hmm.
I think: the next boss in the game is gold. Is how I see it,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that we're a $2 trillion asset now. I don't know what gold is with its price appreciation. How many trillions
I
of
think it's like
dollars?
25, 30 trillion now. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a
Yep.
10x now to get to
Yep.
gold. To me, that's the next game, and 10x is $1 million. It just so happens
Yep.
that we're obsessed with the next 10x. So we'll see what
Right.
gold's price is when we get to $1 million. But to me, the world changes at a certain point between here and there because of that power distribution that we talked about earlier, where I do believe the majority of the wealth on the planet, when Bitcoin somewhere between here and $1 million, will come from people that are holding Bitcoin. And they will become the new power brokers on the planet, or at least they will be in the power broker chat room making waves. And I think that that's when society starts to change in a more dramatic way, in a healthy way, too. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what I won't argue is that Bitcoin fixes all problems. I don't think it does. I think that quite clearly is not a wise thing, is to say that, like, yeah, Bitcoin is the cure to all our ills. It's not, but so
Right.
many ills do come downstream of broken money,
Yep.
and we have a chance to heal those ills with sound money.
Do you I want to circle back to like the China mining ban we touched about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and what happens. So obviously that was one of the most pronounced, the mining network itself, and just the pronounced things, I guess, negatively that has happened, at least in recent history. So what happens is, again, that's a lot of objections that come from people, saying, well, what happens if, the miners go away and all the stuff, whatever. So I would love for you to just kind of unpack for a minute, anyone who's kind of curious about that, but also the beauty of the difficulty adjustment and kind of, what happens at that mechanism.
Yeah, so the giant ban was where the CCP came out and said, hey, you can't mine Bitcoin here any longer. And up until that point, there had been a seasonality where Chinese miners would move to very cheap hydropower when there was abundance of it, and then move to, I think it was coal-fired power plants when there wasn't this abundance. So the hash rate would bounce around, but it was the center of hash because most of the hardware was being manufactured in China. So it was closer and easier for the manufacturers to also mine. And in a large way, like, that represented a way to get around capital controls, because these miners were able to get Bitcoin, and that's uncensorable, right? We all know that. And so that's why I theorized the CCP came in and said, no, we're banning this. That's enough. And what happened is that a lot of hash rate came offline. A lot of people thought, oh no, the sky is falling. We're going to be chicken littles here and freak out. And what happened is blocks slowed down, right? So that meant that there's less people racing to find and produce the next block. And so by definition, the block speed slowed down from the average of every 10 minutes. And within 2 weeks, the next difficulty adjustment caught up for that. So that means that in order to keep the blocks being produced every 10 minutes, if there's less competition, the network and the protocol just reduced the difficulty. So within 2 weeks, the network was back to normal. And on a physical side, there was Chinese miners that were on planes with loads of equipment coming to Texas to figure out how to get their mining rigs plugged in, because that became the next place. And that's when Texas really started to take off as kind of the center of hash. What's interesting now, though, in hindsight, is that if you look back, there was somewhere around 14% of the network, is the number that I've heard, that was always still in China. So despite the most powerful government on the planet, arguably one of the most powerful authoritarian governments on the planet, mandating that something couldn't be done, they still could not manage to completely shut down the mining industry within China, because mining is at its core this cypherpunk thing where have
Mhm.
hardware, have electricity, have internet, will travel, you get your Bitcoin, right? So
Yep.
there was still a subset of people that were operating in the black market there. Now, what I think is that China and the nation state adoption of Bitcoin is meaning that we are seeing folks change their tunes. And I think what we're going to see from China in the not so distant future is some sort of acknowledgement that, oh, we never really banned mining. We've always been here. And we're just, we're going to continue. Like there'll be some sort of like way to save face, but keep mining going as nation state competition heats up for Bitcoin acquisition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really incredible, and just again the difficulty adjustment and just how things ebb and flow is just truly one of those remarkable discoveries, inventions that Satoshi implemented. Just it really is wild. What are your thoughts just on the space in general, the mining space, and what is what could people be doing better? Is there too much, concentration, the mining pools? Like, what are some things that have you concerned, and some things that maybe some developments, and we can even touch on obviously some of the things you guys are doing. I mean, what is SAS mining doing differently, and just some of your thoughts and concerns there, just, overall.
So I kind of go back to the history of how we've acquired Bitcoin. And my biggest
Mm-hmm.
concern is that our community does not take up the musket, so to speak, and defend the network.
Mm-hmm.
It is easy
Yep.
to acquire your Bitcoin by buying it. It is certainly harder and different to acquire your Bitcoin by mining it. And I would argue that all of the centralization issues that have many of us worried, because there are centralization issues that are happening in the mining sector, and those centralization issues can allow somebody to potentially co-opt the network and do nefarious actions that would undermine the value proposition of Bitcoin if they were to play out to their logical conclusion. But those centralizing forces would not have occurred if the Bitcoin community was using the network and mining to acquire their Bitcoin instead of buying it. Because what has instead happened is the majority of Hashrate is on the network mining because their money is dollars, not Bitcoin. And so they're mining to acquire Bitcoin as a stepping stone to get more dollars. And the easiest one to point to, and not to make a boogeyman out of them, because they're not, they're just playing the game that they were set out to play, is the publicly traded mining companies. In fact, I think that's why many of them are pivoting to AI, is because they have a fiduciary responsibility to return dollars to investors as part of their mandate, right? And so they are by definition acquiring Bitcoin to ultimately get more dollars to their investors. And if they can get more dollars by pivoting towards AI, well, shockingly, that's what they're doing. So if the majority of the hash rate on the network is there to acquire fiat, not Bitcoin, are they really going to care if the network starts to centralize a bit? Probably not. So I think it's incumbent on us as a Bitcoin community, and it's what we've been working to address at SAS Mining, which is it's been far too difficult to acquire Bitcoin by mining it. And so we came to market in 2023 with our first data center, but we spent an entire year before that building the software to create a software as a service experience. So the same way that Uber unlocked ride sharing, Airbnb unlocked home sharing. Shopify unlocked the storefront for e-commerce. There's all these software as a service platforms that have come along to unlock an experience to the masses using a native Web 2 approach. We just said, well, geez, this is a time-proven playbook. Let's do that. And so we came along and we've built that experience. So it's as easy to acquire Bitcoin through mining it as it is to, go to Shopify and purchase a product.
Yep.
We can have you acquire Bitcoin directly to your wallet in, typically it's under 28 to 48 hours. So you go to our website, you buy a mining rig, we get it hashing directly to your wallet. We don't make money selling you the hardware or selling you the electricity. We have no markup on either of those or no profit on either of those. Instead, what we do is we instruct the mining pool when it pays the rewards out to split 15% off. And we chose to do that intentionally because we wanted to make sure that if we weren't making Bitcoin for you, that we're not making money, period. And we did that because we saw that trust was really eroded in the traditional hosting place and space, and we wanted to come in and create mining as a service to differentiate away from traditional hosting. And the only way we thought we could logically do that in a consistent way with the Bitcoin community was to reestablish trust. And the only mechanism to reestablish trust in a meaningful way was to tie our fate to our ability to produce the results that Bitcoiners would want.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's very cool what you guys are doing, and very different. What's been the biggest? I guess your previous. We've touched a little bit. I mean, your previous life in the solar and Silicon Valley and stuff. What's been some of the things, maybe one or two things that are very similar, or like you've learned, or that are different? Like, what are some of those ups and downs you've had of just coming? Obviously you're taking things from that old world and bringing them to this, but also you come in, you're like, wow, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, well, I'll address the second part first because I think it's kind of funny at this point. But being accused of being a scammer, I didn't know that was going to go on for years and years. But that's been probably the funniest thing just in our space. I mean, there's just been so many crypto rug pulls, etc., and so many bad actors in traditional hosting that I get it where people are coming from. So I'm not offended at this point. But being accused of being a scammer was not something that I thought was in my bingo card deck for the my entire life. So that's been pretty comical. But the things that are similar coming from like rooftop solar, where I worked for a decade, surprisingly, it's an analogous industry. So rooftop solar is decentralized, right? Is distributed. It's disruptive to the grid itself. It's emergent, meaning that it's been just coming up from the ground up. Your primary product is being imported from China, the solar panels, and last but not least, its profits. The profits in rooftop solar are constrained by an energy network. All of those characteristics are the same in Bitcoin mining. So one is harnessing electricity and the other is producing electricity. But those characteristics being the same means that the rooftop solar industry is actually about a decade ahead of Bitcoin mining in many different regards because they've had to deal with those same dynamics for quite some time. So in some ways, I feel like I showed up in Bitcoin mining with this like secret knowledge that's asymmetric, and at the same time, it's been it's led to a different set of decisions than what the traditional hosting space has decided to pursue. For better or worse, it's led us to a sort of differentiated outcome as a result. And I think a better experience, at least trusted by the community's reaction to us and Trustpilot scores.
Are there any legal or regulatory moves or things out there that have you concerned? I know the last handful of years, I mean, really forever, but the last handful of years have been a lot of just, mining legislation and things that have had the Bitcoin community just kind of like up and then down and up and down. Is there anything right now that's concerning to you that's on the table?
No, nothing specific. I mean, the Samurai case, I think, was quite disappointing to see the results of that and the indictment of those developers. I mean, I don't think they did themselves any favors by painting a target on their back with some of their statements, but I do think it's a problem of free speech and to not allow developers to develop. So I do worry about that, but that's not specific to Bitcoin mining. And to be fair, I am American. I don't live in the US. I've been an expat for about a decade now. And I would say the world is huge, and the issues and any legislation that happens in the US does not necessarily mean that people stop buying our product from outside the US. Mm-hmm. And it's been fascinating to see how far and wide people are coming to find our proposition, because we set up these data centers. We're on 4 different continents now, and we get these mining rigs plugged in there, and people receive the Bitcoin, and as long as they can pay for the hardware and the electricity bill each month, well, I don't really care where they're located. I'm not obligated to report. They need to on their end, so I'm not saying anybody should do anything nefarious here, but, my product is manage a piece of hardware on behalf of clients wherever they may be.
What is the importance of mining and proof of work over just the rest of the cryptosphere and the proof of stake. I know there's a few other coins that are proof of work technically, but most of them are proof of stake. So I'd love for you to just unpack for a minute, because again, this is something that we'll probably be dealing with, continuing on to the future, of the importance of proof of work and the differentiator it is versus really everything else out there, whether it's fiat or other cryptos, etc.
To answer that question, so proof of work is what ties Bitcoin to reality, right? Like, it is that function by which the brute force a calculation to find the next block occurs, so that electricity is consumed in the process. Without that proof of work function, there would not be a tie to physical reality. And I would argue that without that tie to physical reality, we're basically back in the land of fiat, where people can game the system to figure out how to generate more money. Even though I don't really think of it as money at this point. So yeah, I think Bitcoin, last I looked, was like 95+% of the value of all proof of work that's out there. So I'd say it's largely won the proof of work game. And then there's the market cap in total of everything. It's like 65% of the value of all crypto is Bitcoin. So when you look at it from like just a scale back perspective, I mean, it's not really about crypto here. It's about Bitcoin. Like, it is basically the value of everything. So talking about crypto is almost just talking about the long tail. So I kind of get my feathers ruffled when people refuse to say Bitcoin and just say crypto over and over again. I'm like, no, it's like Bitcoin is the elephant in the room, and it's kind of like you're pointing at the floor and talking to the dust motes. Like, why?
Yeah, I love it. I know you got to run here. Do you 30 seconds on the core versus knots? I would love your quick thought on this as we wrap.
Oh yeah. So it's a bit of a spicy take, but I think I went to Tab Confident Atlanta this year, and what was noteworthy to me was not what I saw, but what I didn't see. The absence of a caretaker community, and the absence of looking at a multi-generational project from the vantage point of what has worked for other multi-generational projects. Like, if this is an institution, if Bitcoin is an institution that's meant to go 1,000+ years, why aren't we referencing other institutions that have lasted that long? What did they need to do? What did they need to become? And what I see is that there's a lot of very, very intelligent human beings that are working on it, but they don't have the subject matter expertise of all the various areas that I think we need to have in the room to think about this as a multi-generational project. I mean, where's the historians, the anthropologists, the biologists, even if this is a digital organism? Like, to me, this is an institution that should be on the order of maybe like an Oxford or something. I mean, it's so multidisciplinary, and like, why is it just computer scientists and mathematicians that are focused on this? Cryptographers, we need philosophers. We need, I don't even know what all the right things are, but I just think that as a result, we're most likely, from the core versus not debate, going to ossify because we're going to break down into warring factions, and it'll just be what it is. So pragmatically, that's my look at it. It's not necessarily what I desire, but what I think is the most likely outcome is we're going to see ossification, except for if there's existential threats that come down the pike. I do think the community will rally and agree to consensus changes if we perceive that there's an existential threat. But otherwise, we've got the cake we baked, boys, and let's enjoy it.
Amazing stuff, Kent. Mr. Kent Halliburton, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been, could go for hours with you, and I appreciate you giving us 90 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. It's been a very fun conversation. Thanks for having me.
If you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.